So we have looked at maximizing systematic variance as a measure of making sure we have an effective research design. We have looked at minimizing the error variance as another method of having an effective research design. So now let's move on to controlling for confounding variance. So confounding or nuisance variance, they are variables that may not be of particular interest to you, but they impact on what you are doing. Okay, so we know that the independent variable explains the dependent variable. Okay, so the confounding variable is an hidden explanation that you are not even thinking about, but they contribute to the relationship that you are looking at. So you must take note of this when you are looking at your research design. How are you going to control for them? Because even though they are not of primary interest to you, the confounding variables, they can produce undesirable variation in the study and lead you to making very weird conclusions or even weird results before you get to the conclusion. So at times when you come to the seminar and you are presenting something and we're telling you that, oh my god, this does not look good, why do you think these and these are related? At times, and oftentimes, it's usually because you did not take note of the confounding variables. You did not control for them. Because if you do not control for them, they contaminate or destroy the true relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So let's look at some example, because it's often, I've seen some very interesting presentation where somebody said there is a relation. The more we have rent, if there is more oil exploration and resources from oil exploration, there is an increase in child mortality and all sorts of bad things. So I begin to wonder, how did they come to that kind of conclusion? Because they didn't probably control for the confounding variables, because the relationship is not the way they are actually looking at it. So for example, if somebody said there is a relationship between drinking and longevity, so the more you drink alcohol, the longer your life expectancy will be, or the more you are exposed to pollution, the longer your life expectancy will be. Or there is a relationship between crime and social class. That is not true, because we know that there are so many different kinds of criminal activities carried out by different kind of people, as we are all aware of the different kind of corruption and white collar crimes and violent crimes and things like that. It is weird for somebody to just say that crime and social class has a kind of perfect relationship. No, there are other confounding variables that we need to control for before we can draw this kind of conclusion. But we cannot even draw these kind of conclusions, because if we do not control for the confounding variables, we are going to end up drawing wrong or distorted conclusions. So how do we take care of this? In experimental design, you can look at, let's say you want to look at fertilizer amount and the rate of plant growth. You are controlling the environment, because you are going to plant in the laboratory or in a greenhouse where you can hold all the other potential variable constants. So which means if you are growing the plant in a controlled environment, will make sure that humidity, sunlight, water application, everything is similar across the experiment. The only thing that you're going to change is the level of fertilizer application. So you have controlled for all the other confounding variables by making sure that the system is similar for all of them. The only thing that you are interested in, which is the fertilizer application, is what you are changing in the system. Okay. Then also, if you are using subjects, maybe in clinical trials and things like that, they make sure that the patients that are being used for a kind of the trials, they make sure that they are as similar as possible in terms of their history, their health history and attributes. So you make sure you select subjects that are quite similar so that you can control for any kind of confounding variables. Another way would be to do a random assignment of subjects, because we know in the population things are usually going to be random. Okay, so you randomly, if you have a group of people you are interested in, you randomly select people, since you expect that the confounding variables are also going to be evenly distributed among the experimental group and the control groups. So if you have the control group and the experimental group, which means if you select carefully from the same pool of population, since you know that the population will usually consist of people who are likely to be similar, you have your experimental group and your control group. If you randomly pick people to put in these two groups, you are also finding a way, that's another way to control for confounding variables. So if we do survey research, the situation is different. Okay, so going back to what we did earlier, where we select subjects with similar attributes, the same can be done here. Make sure that, let's say we are interested in using male university graduates as subjects. When we are doing our research, we might need to control for some other aspect of their life in terms of their background, their previous university, the socioeconomic status or socioeconomic background and things like that. There's a mistake here. Instead of gender, if we are picking male, we have already picked male, so we do not need to talk about gender again. Okay, so this is wrong. Okay, so if we are looking at male university graduates, we might look at what are they studying, which faculty, or what type of course are they doing, part-time course, are they doing full-time course, what is their socioeconomic background or status and things like that. We need to control for that when we are selecting. So if we want to pick only people from so faculty, from so background, we could do that and focus on that. But most of the time we get a mixed bag, so you want to make sure that you spread your sample selection across what is possible within this group of this particular population that you want to study. But also, when we are doing statistical analysis, we can do a statistical control. Okay, so there are techniques that we can use to kind of look at, to control for this kind of differences within the group. So if we look at this same group, that the male university graduates, we can control for social class. Okay, so which means we can partition the data into the different class they came from and see whether the same relationship we're seeing. Let's say we're looking at performance or academic performance or academic achievement. We might control for class by looking at those who are from this particular class and those who are from this particular class. We can look at that. Even though we have collected the data, we can look at statistical control in order to control for the nuisance variable, because we know that where people are coming from might have an influence on what they are achieving now. So you might need to take that into cognizance when you are, let's say for example, we look at the rate of spread of COVID-19 among different states. We can control for confounding variables in terms of how big are the cities in each of the states, because we know cities are usually the most vulnerable places where we have more of the COVID-19 cases. So the bigger the city, or the more central the city in terms of people being able to move from other places to the city, we might control for the city size. We might control for the region, whether it's in the south or northeast and so on. We might look at how affluent or how well developed the city is in terms of road networks and accessibility, even though we are interested in seeing whether there's a relationship in terms of whether there are differences in terms of the number of cases, or we want to try and look at association between the number of cases and the number of deaths or something like that. We might need to control for these differences in terms of where the states are, or the kind of city they have, the level of development, the density of the city, and things like that. So these are some of the ways by which you can control. Okay, you can look at your sample selection, or you can do statistical control when you have the data. It's always important to do this, because then you will not be making wrong conclusions when you are finished analyzing your data.